And Jean-Michel, you work for Electron.
Yes.
What is your responsibilities at Electron? What is your sort of job title?
Yeah, so as a product designer, basically I'm involved in so many topics on a daily basis, from coming up with a new concept to working on UI stuff, doing specifications so that UI can be implemented by developers. And then I work on the factory content. I record my own drum machines at home to put on the Digitakt, for instance, and I process it with my own stuff that I mean, it's all over the place. Also help testing the unit. It depends on the stage of the project, really. And the project can take quite a few months to complete. So it's going to be very different what I'm doing at the beginning of the project from what I'm doing at the end. And also it goes up to the very end where I need to update the firmware in the warehouse for the first few units that we're shipping. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell me about some of the products that you've worked on? What have been your big name products that we would have heard of?
Yeah, so I started in December 2020. I started working on the Syntakt. So when I arrived, the Syntakt project was greenlit maybe since like a week or something. So it was very just starting. So I worked on that with other product designers at the time. So I had the former colleagues who were there that also helped on the product design. Then after that, I worked on the analog Heat+FX and then the Digitakt II and Digitone II, which I've done by myself.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me, can you sort of summarize the story of the Syntakt? Perhaps as one example of, you said that you came in partway. Tell us the story. How does a product like come to be? What are the sort of stages and sort of checks and balances that an Electron product has to go through?
Yeah, so the Syntakt, like I said, when I arrived, this project was already decided that it's going to be what we're going to do. But what was not decided yet was it was known that it was supposed to be a drum machine, like it was supposed to be like a mini rhythm, right? So for anyone knowing about Electron, we have this other drum machine, analog rhythm, that can play both analog synthesis and sample.
Yeah.
So at first it was supposed to be that, like that was the main idea, was the concept. But then we started exploring, like, could it have digital synthesis also to make it like kind of more interesting and have more tracks? Because it's difficult to fit like all the circuitry for the analog tracks in that box. We couldn't have put like much more than just a few other tracks if it was purely analog. So we have decided to look at if we could have digital layers. And then we use at first the digital machines from the model cycles, but then we wanted to add a few others also to complete the package stuff that we felt like was maybe missing to round it up. Yeah.
So it changed, the scope feels like it changes through the development of a product.
Yeah, of course.
What I'm trying to say is, like, how do you sort of know that you've got a feature complete product? Was there a point where you say, this is enough, this is good, and how would you get to that point?
I think it's a good question. It depends on the product. So this one has evolved quite a bit during the development. So at some point, it was really thought as a drum machine only. But then Korg announced their like the analog drum machine that also plays samples. I don't remember the name.
Now, Drumlog.
Yeah, so they announced that quite a lot early before releasing that product. But we were developing the Syntakt and we're like, oh no, it's going to be the exact same thing. And we didn't know when they would actually release that. So we decided to see if we could actually make it more grooveboxy in the sense that it could have like more melodic dedicated engines to it also, so that it would have its own spot in the market.
And so we could talk about your work. What did you What can you sort of look at in the Syntakt and say, that's me?
I mean, I was very much involved in so many topics, but I'm mostly working on the UI and the interactions, for instance, and also how things looks on screen. The knob graphics, for instance. This is also something that we decided to push to the next level with this device. It was already started on previous products, where some of the knob graphics were essentially they had these qualities. So here, that was one of those where the overdrive,
Sure,
for
if we can
instance.
see the. You might have to cover it with your hand to like get rid of the reflection.
I don't know. This is even worse. Wait a minute.
Ooh, I feel like there we
Yes.
go. Yeah.
So this parameter, the overdrive, for instance, was like that since a while. It showed like an evolution in the graphics as you turn it up.
It gets crunchy visually.
Yeah. So I really love this stuff. So I was like, yeah, we should just go next level on this and then just try to do every single machine as much as we can with that type of graphics. But then as I was working on this, we also realized that it was serving way more functionality than we thought it would be. Like at first it was like an eye candy thing. Like, oh, it needs to look good. It needs to look fun.
Yeah.
But as we were developing it, what happened is that we started to realize, well, now I recognize the machines. So like all the engines are looking a bit different. And if I use the unit for a few hours, I will remember that, okay, this is my my kick and this is my snare. This is this or that.
Yeah.
So that's on a macro level of the old screen. But then the parameter itself, we're trying to show you some relevant information when we can. It's very difficult to do because we have basically one color we work with and very little pixel. But we're still trying to, some of these parameters are trying to show you some technical, I don't know if you see it.
Yeah, you can just see it. It's like
some technical information and or even the wave shape, for instance. But some of the other parameters, it was like impossible to really capture the idea of what it's actually doing in sound. So then we get a bit more creative, and you get yeah. Let's say if I choose this one, I think the body. Do you see?
Yeah, we can just see it here.
Like like having these fun. I guess this one was more influenced by the name of the parameter than the actual sound. But
yeah,
they are both eye candy. They are also helping out in knowing on which page you are or which synth engine you are. And they also try to tell you an information of where the parameter is at. And if I may add another thing,
please,
is that here, like we have very little pixel to write the parameter labels. So SPCR, I don't know if people
you can see it. Just
see it.
Yeah.
So SPCR is like a terrible label, and we didn't know how to call it. It needs to be essentially 4 letters. You see it like spacing and crunch. You see it when you actually at the upper part of the screen, which we don't see on the screen. I'm sorry, we don't see it, but there's a little pop-up that tells you the long name of the parameter. But if you just have circular knobs everywhere, then your brain, you need to read the parameter label to understand which knob you're currently turning.
Yeah.
And by making all of this kind of its own little universe, then you get over that fact that you don't really need to read the label so much.
Yeah.
Because here, for instance, the noise balance, you see that you have noise on one side and you have like a solid thing on the other side. And once you start using the machine, you would hear that, you balance there's more noise in the sound there, and here you hear more the the body of the sound, for instance.
Can I ask, how do you test this stuff on? Do you test this on people to be sure that that is understood? Because I can see, like, from this is one of the things that it's possible to see from retrospect, but obviously when you're designing something, you know so well what that control does.
Yeah.
And it's that thing of, how do you get around the fact that you know, but you don't know whether we know when we encounter it? How do you test that stuff?
So usually I'm going to do some tests in Photoshop, like I'm animating GIFs to see if the animation looks good. So that's the first thing. Sometimes I'm even looking at my animation on my computer screen and turning knobs and say, oh yeah, if I like is it gonna work when I'm actually turning the knob that way, that this animation is going in that direction? But then we implement it and we try it internally. And then sometimes there are some comments. I feel this one is backwards, or this is kind of too abstract, or whatever. Then I need to go back to drawing all the pixels by hand. So, and then eventually we have also a beta test phase where we're not testing specifically just that, but it's part of the test of the old device, where then we get also some feedback to try to improve on things. Yeah.
You asked about the sort of tiny typography sort of aspect. This is like creating really small text. Do you want to speak on that for a little bit?
Yeah. So interesting things. I don't know if there's any graphic designers here. When I studied design, my teacher would tell me, like, okay, my typography teacher would tell me, like, if you're going to do something, like, try to use the same font, or maybe max 2 fonts because otherwise it becomes like this big...
The font zoo.
Yeah, exactly. So at some point during Syntakt development, we were like, because this grid has not, it's not us that has developed that. It was the previous team before us that developed the whole grid for the Digitakt I and Digitone I. But we were just curious because there's so many fonts on that screen. Like, there is at least 5 on that single screen, and I was like, wow, this is a bit strange that we're using so many fonts. But they are pixel fonts, and I tried a design where we were using the same font everywhere, and it looked terrible, unreadable. Then I realized, yeah, it's since we don't have any colors, we don't have pixels, we don't have colors, but we do have fonts.
Yeah.
And this is where I understood that actually we need to break those typography convention here if we want to create some sort of a hierarchy of information, because otherwise, because it's pixel based, so I don't have any anti-aliasing, which is like the way that font looks smooth on screen. So it's just brutal, pixel is on or pixel is off. And so because the fonts needs to be designed with that in mind, then we need to use fonts that looks a bit different, but it also creates some sort of structure in the
Can you talk, like, throughout all of the products that you've had a hand in,
Yeah.
are there any kind of moments where you've taken a bit of a design cul-de-sac, where you've gone down one route and you realize that something really quite fundamental is not working and you've had to backtrack, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it happens often. I mean, sometimes in the. But do you mean? I'm not sure on which level you're talking about.
It could be on a small level, it could be on a big level, but where you realize that you've done a bunch of work and that maybe you've learned a lesson. You did it the wrong way, or what you did not make enough sense, and you have to rethink what you thought you were going to do.
Yeah, of course. I mean, when you're trying to do interactive stuff, you start with lots of assumptions. So at least when I design, I'm like, okay, it should work like this. I'm taking notes of what the thing I'm designing for should do. And then I'm trying to support everything that it's supposed to do in the description. Then when you actually try it, it's like, it looks really good on paper. Then it's a disaster. Like when you try it. and then you need to start again. Sometimes completely, sometimes you backtrack a bit, and then you can fix some things. So yeah, this is, I think, normal part of doing
Yeah.
interaction. Yeah.
Um, can you talk about, so from the products you've designed, obviously we mentioned like Digitakt II, Digitone II,
Yeah.
and those were more your babies, right?
Yeah.
Is that right? Could you speak to those projects? What, when you think of them, what are the sort of triumphs and the sadnesses that come to mind from
Yes.
those, what would have been massive projects?
I mean, I just want to say also that I'm not alone in doing those things. I was the product designer, but without like the whole team of devs around that are fantastic. I mean, these projects, they would never see the light of day.
And how many people work on a project like that?
I would say like the core team that just work on the box itself, because there's of course other stuff to do around that. We were about 10 people, I'd say.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so just want to shout out to the crew, because it might be easy to think that this is just the pure thought of one person, but it's not. Like, it's a very dynamic thing. We have like these meeting every morning to be sure that everyone is on the same page. It's like a hive mind type of thing there. And we saw some other people than myself come up with some UI stuff and with some ideas. Of course, it's like it comes from all around. So
yeah.
So
what do you remember when you think of those? Like, is it the team, or are there sort of specific things that you like, problems you solved?
There is so many. I mean, I could, like, it's a very vast question, but I could say that, for instance, just the timeline, like working on these projects, we're always overly optimistic. Then the last 2 months we're sweating like hell. This is never gonna work. And then I need to basically go into the warehouse and update everything by hand, because we're supposed to ship them like yesterday to the retailers and everything. So development goes extremely far into the release date, basically. Maybe people will be surprised to hear that we do have some deadlines also. So to respect, like, just about most jobs.
I think and also that thing you're speaking to of like day one firmware updates. And I do see people, I see complaints about that, because, you know, if you think about how things used to be 30 years ago, you could not ship a product with, with a required firmware update. But of course, that's a luxury we have now. And I don't know, like, why does that happen, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah, I think it's because of, I don't know, the deadlines are getting shorter. We need to be more creative into how we work and to how we produce stuff. And I mean, for us, doing a firmware update is not really, I mean, it's not that much of an issue, because I think most of our following is like, they know that we do firmware updates since forever, and they will just check the website and then they say, oh, okay, there's something new. But of course, these things are pretty complex, and as much as we test them, there's always like one use case or that other one that we didn't think about that somebody has, and then, oh, it's broken.
Yeah.
And then we need to sweat again for another few weeks and try to fix everything.
I mean, it feels scary to me, that idea of designing these complex instruments and then putting them in the world and asking people to play on stage with them, because there's obviously so many virtual moving parts.
Yes.
I mean, so it's a question of how you test, but I guess you test thoroughly. But really, what I'm more interested in is this idea of, when you design a product, is designing with immediacy versus depth. Can you speak to how you would design a product that has to be quite simple to get, but has to also have enough breadth that someone can spend years using it and get their money's worth from it?
Yes. So we're not exactly known for our simplicity of use, I think, at Electron. Like, the products are pretty deep. So, of course, when you first design the front panels and the button configuration, which has not really changed so much on the Digis, but let's say the Digitone II has changed quite a bit compared to Digitone 1. We want to now make them kind of future proof because we know that we will do these massive updates at some point, and we need to think of that now. It's very difficult actually to do some big new features on previous box because all the buttons and shortcuts are already taken. And then you start to go into this land of weird shortcuts that are not super easy to remember.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do it. I don't know if it's always a good thing, but sometimes we still do that.
Yeah, that is a hard balance for people wanting to feel they get their money's worth and continual updates. I've seen people complain on Reddit that companies have, quote, abandoned a product because they haven't done continual updates. When the product still does what it was sold on, you know, why did it do we have to do that? Do we have to make things continually updatable, or can they just be as they are?
I don't think so. I think personally, I think you should buy a product for what it is at the moment of you buying it. The updates you should expect is mostly bug fixes. Like, we're trying to make things very stable. But of course, that's also part of the company's history. We've been doing massive updates since the machine drum days. And I think users, they are really expecting always so much stuff to come, of course. But sometimes it might not be doable from our side, and it might be for totally different reasons, like adding LFOs on the analog rhythm is something that we hear often, and we've tried to do that, but we're at the absolute end of the memory there. We don't have bytes left to store these things. So in that case, it was a memory issue. In other case, it might be the CPU can't handle it, or it might be that we don't have the it wouldn't make sense UI-wise to do that. So.
And so it's interesting to hear that there is obviously a point where you're like, we can't put that in a way that will make sense to users.
So it's a bit sad sometimes. We also want these things, but yeah.
With that said, there was a big update that you were responsible for where you added song mode.
Yes. So
is that to Digitakt, or was it to,
it was for the Digitakt 1 and Digitone 1 and Syntakt. So those products were basically conceived as not having song mode, like it was in the specification. They are a pattern-based unit. Then it became I think it was the most requested feature that we always had some people asking for song mode on the DGs. It was like a meme at that point. And we decided, like, let's give it a try. And it became essentially this Pandora's box, or let's say a can of worm that we have opened.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I counted the page, but we had like 40 pages of specification for song mode. And I still think that the interaction is clunky.
Yeah. So you added 40 pages of stuff to an interface that was already finished.
No, but 40 pages of specification. So this is the description to the dev of how the things should work.
Yeah.
And so it was, and this one we had we had so many iterations before we felt, okay, this is probably right. And I think it was a very difficult one to.
Yeah.
We thought, 2-3 weeks we will have some of that stuff in. No.
Lessons learned.
I don't think we've learned that lesson, honestly.
Okay. But speaking of lessons, I was like, well, what are the kind of lessons when you first started your job to now? What would you say to yourself if you could speak to yourself, Jean-Michel, having just started at Electron? What kind of lessons life lessons would you impart?
Good question. I think, of course, when I was hired, I didn't know I was going to do so much UI stuff. I thought I was going to work on like the future concepts or something. It was a bit talks about that in the interview, but at the same time, they had like this test which I had to go through, which was a very UI based. So, I mean, so arriving at Electron, I had different expectation from what I'm doing. Then I realized also that, like I said, I do all sorts of stuff from installing firmware to the machines to creating content for the machines to evaluating content from external peeps to test to like it's all over the place. So I didn't really know that it would be so varied.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's what makes it super interesting. So I used to work at a larger company where I was doing the same thing every 2 weeks. It was like a short loop. And then, you know, after several years, you don't realize it because it happens like slowly, but then you start not really being inspired by what you're doing, but having the chance of going through so many different aspects of a project, I think is very interesting. Yeah.
It's great. Is there anything else that I have not asked you about that you think people should know?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Probably tons of stuff, but yeah, I'm not sure what I could add there. But
One question finally then is, if people were thinking about having a job like yours, you know, if people were thinking about becoming a product manager,
product designer.
Product designer, sorry. Sorry. What would you advise? What is how would you say you got your job, and what is the kind of the skill set?
Yeah, so I was not a product designer before working at Electron. So I'm not fully aware if it's always everywhere the same, like that job especially. Like I said, I do lots of different stuff. I think in a small company, being a product designer, if you know about different parts of the projects, I think this is really helpful. Like people, they are wearing all like different hats. If you're in a larger company, maybe this can be reduced to certain specific tasks. But I would say trying to be aware of the whole process is like of how to develop a product is very difficult when you've never done that.
Yeah.
And this is something that maybe you need to be hired as another job and try to observe a bit how it's done, for instance. But yeah, not being afraid of getting out of your comfort zone to try to do something, but because it needs to be done and you're not enough people, for instance. And then it's like, okay, I'm gonna go there and we'll do it.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to go to the warehouse and update everything.
Yeah. So if you're someone who prefers to do the same thing and be an expert at one thing, maybe it's a bit more difficult. At least at Electron, it would be difficult to do that.
Okay. Well, Jean-Michel, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And go and see Electron stuff. And coming up, we have a talk with Lula York. Thank you.